What's up, True Crime World? You're here with Luminol on the Wall. I'm Bevy.
And I'm Becky. And today's case is about a mother who fears for her family's safety. And when she goes digging for answers, she finds out way more than she bargained for. This is the case of Sara Tokars. Listeners' discretion is advised.
Hello to our LOTW fam. And hey, Beck.
Hey, Beth.
So we thought we would inform you all of our sister Saturday and what we did, at least in part, because we did something fucking funny.
Yeah, we did.
Our dad is on vacation with his girlfriend, and my sister and I and our other sister, aka my brother's girlfriend.
Sister from another mister.
That's right. Met at my dad's home, and we bought all of these tiny, like, wooden button bumblebees. And we bought 80 of them and put them, like, all over his home.
Yeah, we hid them everywhere. They're going to be finding them for months. Hopefully.
And it was thrilling and so funny.
So thrilling.
It really was.
It was fun.
We were, like, running around like, it was great.
And you get a bumblebee, and you get a bumblebee, and you get a bumblebee.
For tomorrow, the next day, and months down the road.
Forever.
And so it was funny, and it was nice. And I would say it was probably insanely rejuvenating. We took a hella cute picture of your dog that we have to post because Rocky looked adorable in it.
Oh, yeah. Yeah, that was like the best.
Like a perfect photo.
Yes.
It's got to be.
Actually, you want to know something cool?
Yeah.
Rocky got selected to be in a calendar.
What?
Yeah. I'm not sure if it's one of those scams or not scams, but like, hey, buy this calendar. Your dog's on the cover and gets a month in the year. Buy the calendar. And then they'd send that to everyone.
Right, yeah.
But I felt for just a brief moment, I was like, oh my God.
My Rocky boy's beautiful.
He's so perfect.
He's a model.
He can be on a calendar. Oh my God.
I'm such a proud dog mom.
Yeah. So I'm not going to post that link because I definitely think everyone's dog got on the cover. And it's, just to make money.
Yeah, but either way.
It felt good.
It felt good. He's adorable.
Little cutie pie.
Yes, but anyways, we'll have to show you guys what we did to my dad's house. We're kind of laying low on it for a bit, though, because we don't want him to see it.
They follow us on socials, and we'll ruin our own surprise.
So we don't want that. But it's funny. So stay tuned.
Yeah, stay tuned to see how it all unfolds.
Yes.
All right, Bev, so let's get into it. So today's case takes us to East Marietta, Georgia, where the Tokars family lives. The husband's name is Fred, and he is a criminal defense attorney. He owns his own practice that ends up being very successful. And his wife, Sarah, is a stay-at-home mom, and she absolutely lives for her two sons, Ricky and Mike. Now, in November of 1992, the Tokars family makes their way to Florida. They're spending Thanksgiving with Sarah's family. This was actually going to be a huge gathering because Sara has 7 sisters, and all of their families were going to be there as well.
Wow, that's a ton of people.
That's a
especially if they
ton
have
of
like
people.
so many kids, which I'm assuming they probably, at least some of them have children as well.
Yeah, a huge family. Huge family.
Huge.
Now, obviously, it's Thanksgiving, it's the long weekend, and the Tokars stay for a couple days in Florida. On November 29th, they were making the 8-hour drive back to Georgia. Unfortunately, Fred had a meeting in Alabama, so he left a little earlier than Sara and the boys, but they all planned to meet back at home in a couple days. Now, in the later hours on the 29th of November, the police got a phone call from a residence in Georgia saying that 2 young boys randomly showed up on their doorstep. They were freezing and covered in blood. The boys were crying, and they said their mother needed help. When the police got there, they immediately searched the area to find the boys' mother, who they presumed was in danger and needed help. They eventually find the Tokars' white car left in a nearby ditch. As they approach the vehicle, they see a woman inside, and it was the body of 39-year-old Sara Tokars. She had been shot to death. Now, after finding Sara, the police head on over to the Tokars' residence to see if they can piece together the events of the evening. So when they get to the residence, it initially looks like a burglary. But there are two things that really stand out to detectives that make them think this was a staged burglary. Number one, the house had been ransacked, but absolutely nothing of high value was taken from the home. Number two, there was no sign of forced entry, but they did notice that the patio door was unlocked. And a little later, they had learned that that lock had been broken before the family even went to Florida. So this would rule out any forced entry. However, they are still able to rule out burglary because absolutely nothing was taken.
Right. So burglary is for sure off the table. So why was Sara killed? Like, what was the motive?
Well, and that's exactly what the detectives need to get to the bottom of. And unfortunately, the only witnesses they have are Sara's two sons, Ricky and Mike. So as traumatizing as it may be for these young boys to rehash their experience, detectives need to speak to them. And what's going to be really tricky about speaking to these boys is that Ricky is only 6 years old and Mike is 4.
So they're so young.
They're so young. And on top of that, what they learn is that Mike actually slept through the whole thing. He fell asleep on the ride home from Florida and slept through his mom getting shot.
Oh my God.
Or until she got shot.
So realistically, they only have Ricky.
Exactly. And what Ricky ends up telling the detectives is that himself and his mom and his brother had been kidnapped from their home, and then their mom was shot in the car. The gunman was a black male, and the gun that was used looked like a pirate's gun. So if a little kid says that, I assume like a musket? I don't really know. So that's all they have to go on initially.
Wow. Oh, that's so sad. The innocence of a child. Like a pirate gun. Like, oh my God. And holy crap, I was not expecting that Ricky would have that much information for the detectives. And with everything he's told them, it kind of seems like someone was lying in wait for this family to arrive home and that the whole plan was to kill Sara.
That's the way it seems, right? And on top of that, Ricky tells investigators that his dad is out of town. He is 200 miles away in Atlanta, Georgia. Obviously, detectives need to get a hold of him, and when they do, they inform him that his wife has been murdered, and he completely falls apart. But obviously, he makes immediate plans to get home. But in the meantime, there is a big question looming over everyone. Are the boys safe, or is someone coming after them too? Did someone not finish the job, right?
Absolutely.
So obviously, number one priority, investigators make sure that the boys are safe and they stay with family until Fred returns home. While the boys are with their family, Ricky asks the most heartbreaking question. He says, "Can I see my mom in the morning when she's out of the hospital?"
No, he doesn't know that she's actually passed away.
Yeah, his young little mind has not realized his mom is dead.
That breaks my fucking heart, Becky.
It's very sad. And the relatives tell Ricky and Mike the harsh truth that their mom, that they love so much, would not be leaving the hospital because she has died. The two boys were absolutely devastated.
I'd be shocked if they weren't. That is, oh my gosh, that's so hard. They're so young. That's like the most tragic thing ever, is that they are so young, having to deal and cope with this
monumental loss.
Yeah, like impossible, right?
Mm-hmm. And seeing the sadness on these two little boys, everyone is absolutely determined and dedicated to find out who the F did this to Sara.
Yeah.
And because the detectives are wanting answers, they start talking to the people closest to the Tokar family, friends and family. And not a single person could come up with any names to who could have done this to Sara, because she had no enemies. So they start looking at Fred's client list and possibly coworkers. Did someone have a slight against him that would try and hurt Sara?
Makes sense. He is a lawyer after all.
a criminal defense lawyer.
Yeah, so it would make sense that if he did protect somebody that someone wasn't happy about, blah, blah, blah.
Or pissed off some criminal.
Right. So it makes sense that that's where they go in their investigation.
Yeah, it's definitely plausible, hey? So when Fred returned home, detectives sit with him for at least like 3 hours going over his entire client list and his coworkers to see if he knew of anyone that would have the motive to harm his wife and his family. But even to Fred, no one stood out. So they ask Fred about his relationship with his wife, and he paints it as an almost perfect relationship.
Wow. Just hearing that they didn't look into Fred and Sarah's relationship initially makes me really think like they did not think that this could have been a possible avenue to look down initially.
I mean, Fred wasn't even at home.
Right. And like, who would do that to their kids, let alone their wife, right? Like,
it seems like too evil.
Exactly. Way too fucking evil. So it's just crazy that is like the third avenue that they look down instead of the first. Because normally when like spouses die, they're like, let's look at the
husband or wife.
The husband and wife, right?
Did you do it?
Yeah, but it's like, that's wild. They're just thinking, no way. No way could someone be that evil.
Exactly. And he's a prominent attorney in the area. I could imagine
a reputation.
That has a thing too, right?
Right, of course. Good job. Good citizen. It would seem like.
No way.
No way.
Do this.
Wow. So anyways, they obviously with no other answers or no other motive, that's their next logical avenue to look down.
Exactly. So, Bev, the couple had been married in 1985. Sarah was 32. Fred was a bit older than her. At the time, he was actually a prominent district attorney. So he was on the other end of the law.
Wow.
He was putting away bad guys. And everyone said Sarah was really proud of who he was and what he did.
She was a proud wife.
She most definitely was. And over the first couple years, they had 2 kids, as we know, Ricky and then Mike. Not too long into their marriage, Fred made a career move and decided to open up his own practice and become a criminal defense attorney. Now, this was a huge sacrifice for Fred and his family, but it was all in the sake of their future. Now, the sacrifice was time. It was noticed by all that Fred had become quite absent within the Tokars' lives, and this eventually put a huge strain on the marriage. She had confided in her sister about the problems they were having, and on top of that, she had mentioned that she actually had become a little fearful. And the reason why is because she was receiving phone calls at home, and when she would pick up, whoever was calling would hang up immediately, and that kept happening.
Over and over. So she's having marital troubles, and some sketchy shit is going on.
Yeah, and she's starting to get a little worried about her family's safety because of it. But her husband, Fred, assures her that no harm would come to her family and that they would all be safe, which is what she wanted to hear.
Of course.
But doubts quickly filled her mind because all of a sudden her little 3-year-old boy, Ricky, walked in holding a handgun that he had found in the floorboard of the passenger seat of the family car.
Holy shit.
At that point, I'm not sure if she even knew that the family had a gun.
In the floorboard of their vehicle.
Yeah.
Holy shit.
So imagine you're sitting there, your 3-year-old walks in carrying a handgun.
I would lose my mind.
I would lose my mind because although the little boy was okay, something bad could have happened, like really bad. But she was just grateful that her little boy was okay and didn't get harmed. But this whole thing really terrified her because she felt that Fred's job was starting to bleed into their home life and was truly becoming a threat to their safety. When Sarah voiced her disapproval, Fred kind of brushed it off, and it's around that time when Fred starts becoming controlling and a little bit abusive while at home. So this seems to be a turning point in their relationship. On top of all of that, Sarah also suspects her husband of having an affair, and it all becomes too much for Sarah, and she tells Fred she wants a divorce.
Wow.
So it comes to a head.
Right. She's like, you promised our family safety.
And I don't trust
clearly that is not what's happening here. There is an inherent threat. Our son just walked through the door with a handgun in his hand. and you're a little bit of a jackass, so fuck off.
That's right.
She's like, I'm done with this.
Yeah. But Fred says that if she left him, she would never be able to take the kids. And we know she is a devoted mother. That is the most important thing to her. So
what a POS, man. Like, classic response, though, right?
Yeah.
Like, you're a stay-at-home mom. You don't have the means to take care of these children, so I'm going to take them from you. It's just an asshole thing to say and do to the mother of your children.
Exactly. And also, like, bitch, she's your wife.
Yeah,
she
like,
gets
how
half
rude.
of everything, or close to. She's going to walk away with that divorce with a good chunk of money.
And she's going to, like, despite what he says and what he's threatening her with, she will be able to see her children. Like, that's insane. I hate how controlling that is. They're not going to be like, oh, you were a stay-at-home mom, devoted mother, and yeah, just because he has a job and money, you don't get to see your children. Like, that's not how it works.
That's not how it works.
But
he threatened her with that, and she's scared of it.
Of course.
She doesn't want to lose her kids. So she tables the divorce for a while, and in the meantime decides that she would hire a private detective to sleuth out her suspicions so that when she eventually did file for divorce, she would have some ammo in her back pocket.
Nice.
After hiring the private detective, she got some of the answers she needed, but felt that there was more information that Fred was hiding. The private detective came back and confirmed Sarah's suspicion of adultery. So although she has confirmed this adultery theory, Sara feels that there is still more that her husband is hiding. So she decided to sneak into his office to see what she could find. And when she was in there, she found some incriminating artifacts. They were hidden documents that proved he was involved in some illegal, shady shit. And this proved that her intuition was correct the whole time. And this is exactly what she needed so that she could keep her children. Now, Sara being a smart lady, she actually made copies of these documents and gave them to her sister. So she didn't want them on her person because she didn't want her husband finding out that she knew.
That is very smart.
Yeah.
And then not only that, but like, given the fact that we know she's dead, not saying that or alluding to the fact that this had anything to do with it, but the fact that she gave it to her sister means that someone else is a witness to this aside from just her, which is fantastic.
Exactly. She has like some backup information and people that can testify to what she was going through.
Mm-hmm.
So after she gave those documents to her sister, she told her that if anything were to happen to her, take these directly to the police.
Exactly. Bingo. There it is.
Yeah. So after Sara was murdered in 1992, her sister did exactly that. She took them straight to the investigators.
Wow. It is truly foreboding of Sara to have said that to her sister. It's almost like she knew that, given the information that she now knew, that something bad could happen to her. And then it did, which even makes it worse because it's very easy to think that that is the reason why she died, right?
Yeah. And if for some strange reason that was not the reason, then what the hell? And when detectives read over these documents, they are absolutely shocked to find out that Fred is already being investigated by the FBI.
What?
For money laundering.
What?
Yes. Caught red-handed. Now, although this is big news, Bev, it definitely does not mean that he specifically had anything to do with his wife's death. After giving those documents to the investigators, Sara's family is working tirelessly to help the investigation move along. So they are able to come up with a $25,000 reward for anyone who has information about their sister's murder. It only took 1 month for a woman to come forward, and she called implicating her brother Curtis Rower. Now, Curtis is a drug addict with a previous criminal record who, on the evening of November 29th, 1992,
the same night that
Sara was murdered. Yes, he had come home with blood on his runners and all over his clothes, and somewhat confessed to shooting a woman. And his sister wondered, was this woman Sara?
Reasonable question.
Absolutely. So this tip resulted in Curtis being arrested on December 23rd, 1992, a mere 24 days after Sara's death. Initially, Curtis said nothing. So detectives are left wondering, who is Curtis in relation to Sara and why would he have killed her?
Right, of course. What is the fucking motive?
And that's exactly what the detectives are wondering too. What is the motive? But before Curtis will give them any information, he asks to make a phone call and call his grandmother. Once he gets off the phone, he tells investigators that his grandmother told him to tell the truth. And that is exactly what he did. He tells them that he shot Sara, but he did not plan the murder. A man named Eddie Lawrence paid him $5,000 to kill her. And on that very same day, police go and arrest Eddie. But this man, he's not saying a word.
Yet again, it's only a matter of time. They'll crack you, Eddie. Don't you worry.
That's right.
We know
Don't
it.
worry.
So wow, a murder for hire. So if Curtis didn't know her and didn't have any reason to kill her, then who the hell is Eddie to Sara? And what was his fucking motive?
That is the burning question, because again, they have a second man who is completely unrelated
What a
to
fucking
Sara.
runaround.
Right? She wasn't involved with anything weird. Like, why is this happening? And again, why would a man like Eddie have any reason to kill Sara? So, detectives start looking into Eddie's life. And they realize that Eddie had gone to Fred Tokars for some legal issues he was having. And then the two men had ventured off and became business partners. They found this super odd that at no point had Fred even mentioned Eddie Lawrence. But when Fred was questioned about Eddie, he said to detectives, "You never asked."
What a lawyer thing to say.
I know.
Right?
Oh, yeah, I guess that could have been useful, but you just didn't fucking ask. So I'm not telling you shit.
Yeah.
So because of these two connections that Eddie has with Curtis and Fred, detectives decide to arrest him.
Makes sense. Duh.
Yep, duh. And the following day, on December 24th, Fred took his two boys to Florida to celebrate Christmas with extended family. While there, Sara's family wanted to see the boys and take them out to cheer them up. Fred told them he didn't feel like going out right then and he wanted a bit of time to rest and that he would check in later. After a couple hours, Sara's father didn't hear from Fred and he actually became pretty worried for the boys. So he went to the motel where they were staying and knocked on the door. When there was no response, they convinced management to let them in the room. When they enter, they see Fred laying on the bed unconscious with pill bottles beside the bed and a note. Sara's father jumps into action and begins CPR and takes life-saving measures and calls 911. Fred is rushed to the hospital where they end up saving his life.
Wow. If that doesn't read guilty, I don't know what does.
I don't know either.
It could be a grieving father.
Could be.
Or it could be that you were involved in your wife's death and you can't handle it.
And they're catching on.
Yeah, so it's just a matter of time before you're spending the rest of your days in a prison cell and you don't want that for yourself.
Exactly. You don't want to go to jail.
So you decide to end your life instead. Cowardly as fuck. Sorry, but it is.
It is for sure in that circumstance. So while Fred is in the hospital, Bev, detectives learn that he had taken out 3 different life insurance policies on his wife for a grand total of $1.75 million. Now combine that with the suicide attempt, and he's looking like a pretty strong suspect. And once out of the hospital, Fred speaks at a press conference, and he vehemently denies any involvement in his wife's murder. He explains that the fact that he was being blamed had caused him to fall into a deep depression and attempt to take his own life.
But he wasn't being blamed.
I think people automatically look at the husband, and when they start hearing about these two guys and how he has connections, I think he was already beginning to be a suspect.
Yeah, but the cops outright didn't even say that. They had arrested somebody else in relation to her murder. So to me, him even going out of his way to say that further implicates him.
I actually agree. And so do the detectives. The press conference did little to change the opinions of detectives and Sara's family. They still believe that he planned this, but they were still working on Eddie and Curtis to really get the full details.
Yeah.
So they didn't have any proof until Mr. Eddie Lawrence finally broke down and admitted that Fred had hired him to kill Sara.
There it is.
There it is. He said that Fred knew his wife had caught on to his illegal crimes and
Which she did.
Yep. And she would use it against him
Which she would.
for custody of their children. Damn
She
straight.
didn't even get a chance to, but
She would have.
that's sad, but she would have for sure. So he's not wrong.
He's not wrong. No. But Eddie did say that when it came time to kill Sara, he just couldn't do it. He was no murderer. So he took it upon himself to hire Curtis to do his dirty work.
Holy crap. That is a twisted tale, man. I can't even believe that. That is not how I thought that was going to happen. Wow.
Caught you off guard, hey?
It sure did.
So Eddie even told the investigators that he suggested to Fred just to divorce his wife. Like, don't go down this drastic route
Yeah,
of
no
murder.
kidding.
Just divorce the lady. Fred explained that it wasn't going to solve his problems. She knew far too much. And even if they did divorce, it wasn't going to be good for him.
Yeah, he thought that she would out him.
Regardless, yeah.
But still, take her life
Seems
to protect
far
yours
worse than murder.
That's insane. Like, he obviously values himself a lot more than he ever valued his wife, and that's just devastating.
And what's kind of dumb about that thought process is that the FBI was already onto him.
Right.
Right? So he most likely was already going to jail regardless of what his wife found out. That's what's stupid. It's like, did you not think that that would have consequences? That you might be going to jail for
The criminal activity that you were already engaged in? Like,
exactly. Now
Yeah.
you just made it worse for yourself. Your children have no mother.
and they're
there's-
going to have no father.
Right? There's
Yep.
no smart ending with his thought process at all.
You know, we had a sister Saturday, which we kind of mentioned earlier, but we also got a chance to watch a new episode out on Netflix called Lockdown.
Yes, we did.
And honestly, it was about people who are basically awaiting their trial for really egregious crimes like capital murder and rape and the like. And they're on 23 hours of lockdown and they get 1 hour out in the jail, like, for free time. And as we were watching it, like, their reasoning, their criminal reasoning, even within the jail cell, was so wild.
Fucked. It was so fucked.
so fucked. Like, we talk about criminals all the time and we're like, how could they think like that? Did they not think? But it's like, truly, when you watch this, you're like, wow, the criminal mind truly thinks differently. Like, it's not rational.
No, it's funny because they make their own logic and you're like, okay, I can see based on the criminal mind why you'd say that, but in real life, that's not logical.
Not logical. So you can tell this guy has that criminal mind where it's like your reasoning for doing horrible things to other people, like,
Messed up.
it's messed up and you rationalize it. And it's so messed up. Like, what he's doing is just so messed up. Like, why would you ever choose to kill someone to protect yourself from, like, your own fucked up choices? Like, it's just silly. Like, he lacks the accountability for his own actions and is blaming his wife. So that's how he rationalizes it, right?
Yes.
But it's like zero accountability and so messed up. So you guys, if you ever get a chance, like, watch the show just to kind of get some insight, because I think we were like shocked. We're like, wow, like, these are the kind of people that we talk about on our podcast every week. But it was like, wow, like, it just put it into perspective, right? It was kind of like jarring.
Yeah, it was weird to hear their thought process from their own mouth.
Yeah.
And at one point, me and Bev just sat there and I was like, what? Like, you're just so flabbergasted.
Yes.
And you can't even fathom that someone thinks like that, because we don't.
We sure don't. No.
It was really hard to hear and it made me really sad, but there are people out there that think like that.
Yep, there are.
Now, one of the other questions that Eddie posed to Fred was, if you kill your wife, like, what about your kids?
Exactly. What about your babies, man?
And Fred, all he said was that they're still young and that they would recover.
Holy shit.
But I'm like,
What a psychopath.
were you aware of the exact plan? Did you know your wife was going to be killed in front of them? And if you did you not think once of the lifelong
consequences?
that those boys would suffer through?
And not only that, but do you ever really recover from losing your mother? Like, no, you don't.
No.
You don't recover from that. That's so crazy.
I know.
What a cold and callous human.
Seriously. Well, after hearing all of this from Eddie, detectives believe that they have enough on Fred that they can arrest him right then. But because Fred is in Florida with his kids, they are fearful that if he catches wind that they're coming after him, that he would do something outlandish to hurt his boys or even kill them. So they need to be very calculated in this move. So they wait for the perfect opportunity, and on August 25th, 1993, 9 months after the murder of Sara Tokars, police head to Palm Beach, Florida, where Fred is staying with his mother. They try to figure out how can we get Fred away from his boys so that they're safe. And what they do, knowing that Fred has been really frustrated with the massive amount of media coverage, is pose as news crews and journalists to surround his mother's house. They do this to get under his skin. And when Fred comes out of the house to confront them, they know that Ricky and Mike are safe, and they arrest Fred Tokars.
Wow, that's a genius freaking plan, man.
You know, it must be kind of fun doing that to criminals. Like, haha, tricked
We got you.
Like, I would find that
very
entertaining.
smart, though.
Mm-hmm.
Very, very smart. I like it.
Yeah. It makes me sad that they're so scared for the boys. I would be too, but it does make me sad.
Yeah, to think that their own father would be capable of hurting them. And I mean, he's proved that to save his own ass, he's capable of murder. So it's not a far stretch of the imagination to even assume that he would hurt them. But yeah, I agree with you. It's sad.
It is. Well, fortunately, now all 3 men involved in this murder for hire are arrested. They all get separate trials. In 1995, Curtis Rower's defense tries to explain that Sarah's death was an accident. He said that when they had pulled over, Eddie had approached the vehicle and tried to grab the gun from Curtis. Within that struggle, somehow the gun went off and shot Sara. But the prosecution has a star witness that was there that night who contradicts the defense's theory, and that witness was Ricky Tokars.
The son.
Yes. Ricky testifies in court to what he had seen that evening, and in February of 1995, he tells the courts that him, his mom, and his brother had pulled up to their home around 10 p.m., and that they were all exhausted from the long 8-hour drive home from Florida. He said his mom had left his brother in the car sleeping while she got him and the dog out of the car and into the house. His mom unlocked the door, and it was dark and quiet, when all of a sudden a man jumps in front of his mom and makes her go back outside. The whole time, his mom was pleading with the man not to hurt them. When outside, Ricky says the man then kicked their dog out of the way and forced them back into the car. He said his mom was driving and he was in the front passenger seat, and the man sat in the back seat beside his sleeping brother. The man then forced his mom to drive at gunpoint and gave her directions as they went. They ended up on a non-lit road, and as they were driving, Ricky hears his mom say, "Don't hurt the boys," and then the gun went off. And then the shooter jumps out of the car while it's still moving, and eventually the car came to a stop. He then took the keys out of the car and checked on his mom. He wasn't sure if she was sleeping or dead. Regardless, he knew his mom needed help, so he grabbed his brother, and they find the closest house with the lights on and head to it. When the door is answered, the man sees the 2 young boys covered in blood and calls 911.
Oh my God, they were covered in her blood. I can't. I find it truly sad that the last thing she said was like, "Don't hurt my boys." I mean,
she's more worried about them herself.
Yeah, it's like, if that is the lasting memory that those boys have, it's equally devastating and beautiful at the same time to me.
Oh, for sure, because they know
without a shadow of a doubt
their mom loved and wanted them safe.
Yeah.
Now, Bev, during the court proceedings, the defense team tries to use the fact that Ricky was only 6 years old, and they tried to argue, if you're that young, how could you remember all those details? Ricky basically says, "You remember the first time you hit a home run, don't you? It's like that. You always remember."
Oh,
he was
God.
like, he was steadfast in what he remembered. And I actually do think that he'll remember that for the rest of his life. That is something you will not forget.
100%. Oh, God, that is so... The innocence in that statement, though, It's like your first home run. Oh, man, this is hitting me in the feels. Rebecca, I feel so sad right now.
I know. Never before have you ever heard a home run related to a murder.
Yeah.
Well, because of this brave little boy, Curtis Rones is found guilty of first-degree murder, and he's sentenced to life without parole. For Eddie's involvement, he was too sentenced to life in prison. Now, in 1994, Fred Tokars was found guilty of federal racketeering, which, for anyone who doesn't know, is a set of illegal activities aimed at commercial profit that may be disguised as legitimate business deals. So that's what the FBI had been investigating before the murder. And then, in 1997, he was found guilty of first-degree murder for the death of his wife. During his court hearings for the murder, the judge decided that it would be too much for Ricky to testify against his father face-to-face. So they would use the transcripts of Ricky's testimony from Curtis's trial instead. Thank God.
Thank freaking God. Oh my God, the poor child doesn't need to be put in that situation. He's already had enough trauma. He doesn't need any more.
Yeah, thank God for that, Judge, hey?
No kidding.
So while in prison, Fred actually had a really interesting existence. His peers found out that he was a lawyer, and they used force to get him to act as their lawyer during their appeal process. So they beat him up.
Classic.
To get them to do what he wanted.
Classic. After watching that series that we were talking about earlier, it's like classic.
Yeah, that
of
tracks.
course they would. That
Yeah.
tracks. Yeah.
Sounds like a criminal
to get
thing
what
to
they
do.
want, beat the crap out of somebody until
Yeah.
they do what you want. Yep, makes sense.
Exactly. And they left him with the threat that if he at any point stopped,
They would kill him.
they would, well, I don't know if they'd kill him, but he was not, it was not good for him if he
Yeah,
didn't.
he was going to get beat to a pulp.
So because he had agreed to do that for a lot of criminals, he actually found out a ton of juicy details about other crimes. And Fred used this information to help solve other major crimes in other states as well. He did this with the hope that he would be shown some leniency towards his own sentence for helping. But that appeal petition was completely denied, and all further appeals for leniency also got denied. Fred and his lawyers took it all the way to the 11th Court of Appeals, which is as many as you can almost get. And it was still denied. So he wasn't leaving jail anytime soon. Some people were shocked with that because he did so much for other cases, and there were people who did far less than him and got time taken off their sentences. But because Fred was still in jail, he was now known as a snitch.
Jeez.
A rat, if you will. He was put into witness protection in the prison and was given his own cell with a private toilet, cable TV, and he had access to phone calls.
What the fuck?
So, despite the fact that he was kind of segregated from other inmates, he got some nice privileges.
Jeez.
For
it's
prison.
like, what the heck is going on?
He's still a terrible guy, God.
Like, I actually do get why they put him in witness protection, but it's almost like the inmates did the opposite of what they wanted. It was like, we're going to threaten you and make it so that, you know, we might kill you or seriously harm you. And in return, you will have privacy, you will have phone calls, and you will be able to watch TV, sir.
Yes,
They're
your
like,
prison
shit.
existence will be rather luxurious.
Shit.
And kind of surprising, despite having access to phone calls, Fred did not have any contact with his children as they grew up.
You know what? That doesn't actually surprise me.
No, if I was either of his sons and found out what he did, I'd be like, hell no, I don't want to talk to you ever again.
Yeah, no
You're a
kidding.
murderer. You killed my favorite person in the world.
Yep.
Screw you, pal.
Screw you, pal.
Stay in prison.
You ain't my daddy no more.
I denounce you.
Mm-hmm.
Now, unfortunately, Bev, Mike, the younger brother, when he was 31, he ended up passing away from a pulmonary embolism, so a blood clot. And because the boys had no contact with Fred, Ricky had no immediate family left. And then more recently, in May of 2020, Fred actually died in prison. He had been admitted to the hospital with a fever and died a couple days later. For the last decade, he had been suffering with MS, so he was wheelchair bound and
Not doing so hot.
not doing so hot. So when he got a fever, I can imagine that amplified everything and his body just wasn't able to combat what was going on.
Well, I know that MS is an autoimmune disease, right? So when you have MS or an autoimmune disease of any sorts and you get sick, it can be potentially life-threatening because you just don't have the ability to fight it off in the same way that someone who doesn't have an autoimmune disease would.
Exactly. Now, there is speculation because this is the very beginning of the pandemic that he died from COVID, but we're just really not sure. But either way, Sara's family got justice for her death.
Yes. All 3 people involved were prosecuted.
And spent a long time in jail.
Yes, exactly. And I'm happy that justice was served in this specific case and that although Mike and Ricky tragically lost their mother, that they can live their life knowing how devoted she was as a mom to them and that even in her dying breaths, she was looking out for them.
100% Bev. Well, Bev, that's all I have for you today. This is the case of Sara Tokars. Thanks for listening.
Thanks for sharing.